completely, blown away that the tarot, you can see it from upside down, from all different aspects, like a mandala.
Mhm.
So he realized it from one aspect. The journey starting from here, and this is where it ends up, and this is a journey of life.
So,
But it can start from the
so
other way around.
I need to interrupt just for a minute. I've got us online, and good evening, everyone. This is a continuation of Tim Lawrence's Summer of the Major Arcana. And I'm going to be dropping in and out because this is Nick's show tonight. And so welcome, Nick, and thank you for serving as the Master of Ceremonies tonight. So far, we haven't killed one another, so that's a good sign. And I'm going to mute and hide so that you don't feel intimidated by me.
All right, thank you, Skip, and good evening, everybody. I am glad to be back with you all, and we will just get right into things here. So let me get my screen shared. Just one moment. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Okay, so the title of this presentation is Tarot Permutations, the Heavenly Alchemist. Okay, so just to recap on what we've been doing in the previous weeks, let's see here. The idea of this mini-series is to explore combinations of the tarot's major arcana and how, once combined, pairings or groupings generate new insights into the meanings of the cards in relation to one another. The reasons for this are many, but the main point of consideration is that the cards of the tarot form a complete system that must be studied thoroughly in order to have a proper understanding of the whole. Following a logical order of operations, one must study the cards individually and learn the meanings while allowing them to take on a life of their own. However, I would contend that one cannot have a proper understanding of the whole, the gestalt of the tarot, without a consideration of the relationships between cards. This will be our endeavor in this mini-series. Before we begin with tonight's presentation, I would like to first share a few quotes from Alejandro Jodorowsky's book, The Way of Tarot, the Spiritual Teacher in the Cards. So, one moment. Okay, so I've got 4 quotes here, and they're very juicy, so please do just sit tight while I read through these. Okay, on the combination of cards and their meanings. Instead of allotting one and only one function to each card and interpreting the cards selected as a series of sentences, we can deal with the tarot like a language in which 2 by 2, then 3 by 3, then by increasing the number, the cards respond like the instruments of an orchestra. I think it's worth noting also last week in my breakdown of the etymology of the word symbol, synchronized symphony and orchestra all kind of share a root word in common, in that they are moving at the same time as one whole. Okay, in reality, a sacred text or symbol needs to be seen, and all its minuscule details have to be read. The whole of an arcanum is the sum of its details. This is the reason that no one can boast of knowing how to read the tarot if he or she has not entirely memorized the many tiny symbols on all the cards, as well as the numbers of lines, colors, positions, facial expressions, and alleged errors or blunders in their design. The hidden complexity of the major and minor arcana of the Tarot of Marseille is so great that it definitely requires a number of years to see the details in their totality. There is always a detail that escapes notice. This is because it is not only the surface of a single card that matters, but many details also become visible when one arcanum is compared with another, which is precisely the premise. Okay. The majority of the books teaching the tarot are satisfied to describe the arcana one by one without explaining that these cards change depending on the other cards with which they are related. Before forming sentences, letters, consonants, and vowels must form syllables, that change depending on the order of their composition. Ma leads to other concepts than am. Is different from psi. No from on, and so forth. These syllables are the pillars for words, which then form sentences, then essays, then poems, gospels, or infamous texts. And finally, my personal favorite here. When the cards are alone, they can be considered as isolated protagonists. In the theater, they would be giving monologues. This is Homer reciting the Iliad or a troubadour singing. The meeting of two cards makes a dialogue, and it is starting with three cards, as is also the case when starting from three people, that the tarot becomes dynamic. With three cards, a dense artistic phenomenon is created. So I included those quotes because I felt that they were germane to what we're discussing here in this mini series. And also I want to remind the viewers of the analogy of, imagine all of the characters of the tarot, the major arcana, are at a dinner party with one another. And one approaches the other and they strike up conversation. Do they get along well? Do they have lots to talk about? Are they good friends? Or do they turn their nose up at one another, really dislike each other, and have nothing to talk about and want to terminate the conversation immediately? So exploring that question is the work of this mini series. Okay, so a little bit on the methods of comparison used for the cards, which we will explore tonight. The method of comparison I will be using for tonight's presentation is loosely the dialectic method of comparison. Thesis as the original idea, antithesis as the counterposition, and synthesis as the combination of counterpoints to form a third position. My approach for tonight's grouping can better be understood as a somewhat hierarchical structure, or a structure with levels that are somewhat distinct from one another, but which also interpenetrate one another, and in the final analysis combine to form a gestalt. And again, a gestalt just means the sum of the parts. And again, loosely, I use the topographical method of comparison, looking at the landscape and placement of the figures in the cards to posit a relationship between the cards based on similar locations and shared elements. Okay, so that's the kind of groundwork for getting into the cards. I wonder if anybody has any comments, questions. If you do, please speak up, and if you don't, I will sally forth.
Right now, I don't think that we have any questions, so.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Cool.
Yeah, I'll just say I really resonate with the way you're picking out things to interdependently relate things together. So I think I don't have any questions. I'll just second Raquel.
Cool. All right. Well, going forward. Okay, so these are the cards we're going to explore tonight. So the three card structure formed below and the relationships the cards have with one another will be the topic of the presentation this evening. The triangle in the middle of the cards will serve as the structural example through which we will explore the cards and will be used continually throughout the presentation. Please do keep this in mind. That's the triangle, as well as the cards, but specifically the triangle. So bottom left, we've got the Strength card. Bottom right, we've got the High Priestess card. And at the top of the triangle, we have the Hermit card. Okay, so this may seem somewhat complicated, or maybe not. I don't know. If it is, or if it does seem that way, please prod me and I will be happy to break down anything that I can. So setting the stage, the tripartite structure. So A represents strength card, which again, going back to this triangle, is the bottom left portion of the triangle. The high priestess, the bottom right portion of the triangle. The hermit, top portion of the triangle. Okay, so A, B, C, all related to each of those cards. Okay, so strength. Within the given combination of cards, strength will represent the animalistic and instinctive side of the human, which is defined by basic drives and belongs to the natural world. This is represented by the fiery lion in the card. Okay, and then from A, we move to B across the bottom of the triangle. The high priestess. Within the given combination of the cards, the high priestess will represent the judging and valuation process, as well as the human's capacity for self-reflection. This is represented by the water issuing from the priestess dress and from the pool of water behind the veil she is seated before. So going back, this is an oft overlooked detail, and I think this is actually a detail that is not present in the Rider-Waite deck. But if you look closely at this card, you can see that she's seated between two pillars with a veil, but beyond that is a body of water. Okay. And then we move to the top of the triangle, and this is the space of the hermit. So the hermit. Within the given combination of cards, the hermit will represent reason, self-knowledge, and insight as the wise and solitary figure atop the mountain. This is represented by the hermit's lantern. So the implements of each card I'm assigning to the meanings, whereas the instinctive and animalistic side of the strength card is associated with the fiery lion. The capacity for self-reflection is associated with the water in the high priestess card, and the capacity for insight and reason and self-knowledge I'm associating with the hermit's lantern. Okay, and then in this triangular structure I have here, A moves to B, B moves to C, but then C goes down and it is able to access both A and B. So we've got CA and CB in the middle of the structure. We don't have to go into that entirely right now, but I do explain it in depth much later in the presentation. So this is just kind of setting the stage for what will come later. Okay. Any questions on that front?
I'd say no. I like the circle and the way it, again, interrelates. Triangle, circle, so to.
I've got a circle for you later, but thank you. Okay, so now moving to the strength card. Okay, in this structure, I elect the strength card to represent the instinctive and animalistic side of man. Humans are carried along on the back of instincts in many cases, just as animals are. The life of man is defined by instinctive drives: the survival or self-preservation instinct, the instinct to procreate or the sexual instinct, and the social instinct or instinct to gather and form herds, tribes, groups, civilizations, etc. These instincts are constantly working, whether we participate in them consciously or not. Instincts are the components which aid man's move through the natural world and are shared by most animals, as well as all humans. While they make themselves known through automatic developments in one's life, the instincts are not necessarily psychological so much as they are of the body. That is, they occur below the threshold of awareness and manifest more so in the drives of the body. As such, they partake in a nature which is shared more so by animals than by humans. The defining characteristic of the human is the capacity for forethought, as well as the capacity for self-reflection, and the instincts are anything but. Moving now to the imagery of the card, the woman, the representative of the human realm, calmly opens the mouth of the lion, effectively giving voice to the instinctive capacities within. The instincts can manifest in one of two ways, either as an adaptive capacity or, if overly identified with, as a subversive and maladaptive capacity. To say this another way, the instincts require a driver, much like the lady in the picture, which allows the lion to speak. Okay, so strength card continued here. Without the capacity for self-reflection and conscious participation in the life of instinct, the result is identification with the instincts, which gives rise to compulsive engagement with the pleasure or the power principle. Lions will kill an entire pride of cubs, only to then impregnate the lioness so as to repopulate of its own seed. Fear for the furtherance of a more powerful lion results in the death and destruction of all cubs fathered by another lion. Notice the words at play here: pride, pleasure, fear, death, destruction, self-preservation of one's own seed and not another. This is analogous in some respect to the happenings of a human overly identified with the instinctive capacity. And while this seems like a rather brutal example, I do think it's pertinent, at least by way of analogy. Okay, that said, if the instinctive side of the human is tempered with the capacity for judgment, creation of values, and self-reflection, one can allow a healthy expression of the pleasure and power principles rather than a maladaptive, compulsive, and pathological expression. One allows the lion to speak and not to uproariously usurp. All right, that's picking up on the part of the image where the woman seemingly gives voice to the lion. She opens its mouth, or at least has her fingers in its mouth, so it would stand to reason that she's opening the mouth, or at least exerting some degree of control over the lion in its mouth. Okay, so in summary, there's a positive and negative expression of the instinct. In the positive, instincts serve life and its furtherance and fullness. In the negative, instinct is pathological and subjects the subject and object to malice. Think of Freud's id, or Jung's 2 million-year-old man within every human that need be sated. Okay, so that's what I have for the strength card, and now we're going to move to the High Priestess.
Before you do, Nick, I'd like to also add to your perspective there. I've also seen then the lion being the psychological function of intuition, in parentheses, instinct, and then transforming to sensation through voice. And rather than giving the lion voice, it's her natural inner animal voice integrated consciously expressed through her voice, as another perspective, as a way to look at it, in addition to you saying giving the lion voice.
Yeah, that's I was I guess hoping that people would read between the lines, not the lions.
I was going to say that's a good, yeah. So you, for punitive damages, that's a great pun. So you read between the lines, please.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Okay, anybody else?
I'll wait till you put up the 3 cards and then I'll comment.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now moving to the High Priestess, and I want to also just double back so we all have this in mind as we're going forward. I've started with A here, the bottom left of the triangle, and now I'm moving to B. So these meanings are going to kind of build on one another. Okay, the High Priestess. Whereas in the previous card, the fiery lion of Leo represented the instinctive side of man, here, the High Priestess represents the capacity for judgment, creation of values, and most importantly, the capacity for self-reflection. Reflecting on the line in the strength card, the line from D.H. Lawrence comes to mind. I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. That is, I never saw an animal reflect upon its wildness or exhibit any capacity for self-reflection. The animal is, and without reflection, and the human reflects upon its own isness. Man is, and is one in doing so. But as soon as man bears witness to his being, he is two. Man could be a single one in his instinctive, animalistic way, but it is man's capacity to stand back and bear witness to his isness that makes him truly human. I also just want to say I'm using man generically to mean mankind. In the case of the high priestess, she is the exemplar of water and the reflection of self we find in the watery mind stuff she emanates. Just as the high priestess is the second card seated between two pillars, so man is also two in his being and the reflection of himself. The high priestess holds the scroll of the Torah, which means law and was originally written on the hide of animals. This says that the high priestess holds in her hand the laws of the natural and instinctive world of the animal, as if she is the key out of the unreflective and into the self-reflective. The capacity to assign meaning and value to behaviors through self-reflection and not to simply engage in the superficial demands of the instincts is the meaning that arises from the comparison between strength and the high priestess. It is the move from instinctive mindlessness to meaningful valuation, and from fiery intensity toward watery reflectiveness. And again, I'm drawing upon this water symbolism that's both behind the veil, but also in her dress as it flows down, turns into water, which then also flows behind the Empress in the following card. So now moving to the Hermit. All right. Moving from the self-reflection of the high priestess and the unreflective life force of the strength card, we now move to the Hermit card. The Hermit is the wise old man, from which we derive the title wizard, and which means philosopher and sage. The Hermit is the one who knows, but knows what? The Hermit possesses self-knowledge, and yet again, what is self-knowledge? Self-knowledge is not an autobiographical account, but rather a deep and existential knowing of the many facets of oneself, the very components which one is made of. The Hermit knows that he is an animal, and in doing so, is not so. And the Hermit knows the tricks which watery vapors throw on the eyes and create illusions. The Hermit knows enough to know that he does not know much, yet he is one, solitary, isolated, and monadic, above it all, in casting his light upon the toilsome trail toward knowledge of the true self. The Hermit here represents the light of reason, as his lantern lights the path and draws all of man nearer to the Anthropos. As the light of reason, the Hermit knows that he must give reasonable expression to his animalistic and instinctive side, as well as his judging and value creating side. And yet it is by reason that he allows the expression of each. He knows the many figures which live within him and seek expression through him. And in doing so, he truly knows himself. Even though the Hermit radiates the light of reason, he understands that he stands under the reason of light. In relation to the previously mentioned cards, the Hermit, through knowing himself, serves as a reasonable mitigator of the high priestess and the strength card. He knows when to be a natural animal and when to discern the meaning and value of a given experience. Thus, he expresses the fullness of his being by employing each capacity at will, and as such is a true philosopher, a lover and friend of wisdom. So going back to this triangle, C is represented by the Hermit. So when I said that the Hermit knows that he's an instinctive and animalistic character in some sense, that's C dropping down and accessing A. So it's C, capital C with the lowercase a. It's the Hermit in conjunction with the instinctive animalistic side. And then when I said that he also has access to his capacity for self-reflection and value creation, judgment, that's the realm of the High Priestess and the realm of self-reflection. So this is the Hermit dropping down from C to the capital C lower B. So it's the Hermit in conjunction with the High Priestess. So that's the basic scheme that I'm trying to outline with this triangle, that essentially we have an evolution from A as the Strength card to B as the High Priestess card, which then gives way to C, the Hermit, but then they form a total, and the Hermit has access to both previous stages of initiation or development. Okay, so I think now would be a good time to stop and just hear what you all think.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. It's very interesting how it goes from 1, 2, 3. And in my estimation, each one carries also the beginning, the middle, and the 1, 2, 3. Because, for example, the High Priestess, in the reflection, everything is there. She has access to light, and she has access to the instincts. So in some way, each one is whole within themselves, even though you chose to give this representation, this path. Like when I look at strength, if you look at the garland around the neck of the lion, it's also on the head of the woman. It's exactly the same. So that means that includes the Hermit already in the first card, meaning that the reason which resides in the head is already present there, and is also at the same time in the lion. So each card somehow, and then in the Hermit, he's got the blue, maybe representing water or whatever, as a headpiece,
Right.
And he also has the background, which is black, which is, out of the black is where you can see light. So and the priestess, and he has white too. So the High Priestess has those two things as well. So even though you chose to give that sequence of 1, 2, 3, in the reality, in my experience of what I am looking at, it can be started from anywhere. The 1, 2, 3 can come at any of it, even though I sense that it is designed in the way you did it, because it follows Mercury. That Mercury is the, by reason, which is Mercury, is the way to evolve human being. So I was wondering where the emotional side here, because of the heart center and such. So what I experienced in this triad, the way that it was presented, it is that it is mostly related to the evolution of Mercury. Strictly Mercury, which is the thinking function and the enlightenment through the headset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's probably an apt observation. At the same time, I would say that I was kind of thinking of the sulfur, salt, and Mercury triad as I was going through this. Fiery redness being associated with sulfur in the strength card, salt and bringing things down associated with the High Priestess and Mercury as the Hermit. So I don't know if those overlap with one another exactly, but I was at least thinking in terms of all three of those and not just in the evolution of Mercury. Although I can completely see what you're saying.
Well, in the way that you presented the progression up to C, and that C then includes A and B. So in that progression, then if one examines it, is the progression of reason, which is ruled by Mercury. And what I was proposing is that, let's say if I make the High Priestess number 3, by reflecting, everything is there. That is a key of evolving, which comes from the feminine more so than reason. The reason will be found in the reflection. The instinct will be also found in the reflection. So what I was trying to share is that it can start in different places.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. And I'm only about halfway through the presentation here, and I have some other ideas kind of on that topic. But what I was trying to lay out was this scheme.
May I, Nick, may I make a comment?
Please.
That speaks to Gilda's, because I know the logistical structure here is to keep pairs, triads, basically interdependencies, and the relatedness of cards. So to actually support Gilda's comment and then bring it more into context and immerse it, Mercury is ruled by Gemini, and on the astrology chart, it's in opposition to Sagittarius. Sagittarius being very, very fiery. So in a sense, there could be an analogy to the sun. So then that Mercury is the consciousness of that emanating creative wellspring life force of the sun, that then is again further in context for your C to the whole solar system and the universe. So rather than limiting it just to it's only Gemini, I think if we triad or interrelate Mercury to Sagittarius, attribute it to the sun, and then come out, we have a really legitimate interdependent context. I think to take Gilda's idea there, that I think is solid, but then use it as a catalyst to run with and bring it back into the, I think, related topic structure that you're looking to provide here.
Yeah, I mean, we could also, pick up on some color theory here. I mean, am I wrong in saying that blue and yellow, A and B, combine to create C, the green? I can't hear you anymore.
If you're in pigment, but in physics and light, blue and yellow make white. So to distinguish pigment versus light frequency color melds.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that, because I was trying to allude to some kind of optical phenomena philosophy here, where I said, as the light of reason. Oh, wait a second. Let me find this. I will admit that I was somewhat proud of this line. I think that there's a lot there, and I won't even admit to completely understanding it. It's just something that kind of came out, but I do want to say it again.
Yes, please reiterate.
So, even though the Hermit radiates the light of reason, he understands he stands under the reason of light.
Mm-hmm. That's very nice.
Yes. What's interesting, you have an expression of the Atman, ATMAN, the larger than large and smaller than small s self, large s self, but both in the context of the capital A, all, and then all that immersed in the void. So, I mean, I would be proud of that line. That's a wonderfully concise way to express that.
Thank you.
Yeah. When I conceived my ballet, I wrote something about I wrote like a little one sentence for every card as an introduction before the whole thing pops. And the Hermit was something like, I'm at the top of the mountain, in other words, he can see everything, but I am blind as a bat. So meaning that even though he's there's a lot he doesn't know, still in the journey to the journey that completes, that's actually infinite. So he just has at that moment he's there, but he knows that he's also very blind to a lot. So
Well, Gilda, that's a
reason.
wonderful point, because
Yeah.
then there's instead of blind, as we would say, like, I can't see, when you said blind as a bat, I see that as an animal melding the instinctual and the sensation vision, because that's echolocation is an intuitive seeing. And you're seeing in the dark, literally, from sound and from reflection. So in a sense, echolocation might actually integrate all four psychological functions. I mean, there's the feeling, the sensation, intuition, and thinking that all are working in harmony, which in a sense make a sixth sense with the bat. So when you say blind as a bat, he's enlightened by being connected rather than enlightened by I can't see. And then there's also, like you said, there's more to learn.
Exactly. He's enlightened because he's connected, but he knows that the greatness and vastness of it is just beginning.
I really want to just point something out here too. Like, you know, I say I don't understand this comment because I can't expound on it any further. But I think I kind of intuitively understood or am meaning to allude to something. And it's this idea used by a philosopher and astrologer named Marsilio Ficino from the Renaissance period. I won't go very far into it, but he's essentially a Neoplatonist, and he practices this thing called via negativa, or apophatic theology, which is essentially a practice of saying God is not this. It's like negatively establishing what God may or may not be. And it essentially circles around this idea that we can't understand whatever that is. And for us to say anything that says God is kind of negates what we might be right in saying it is. So to me, this is a term that he uses, the light of reason, and then contrast that with the reason of light, is it's a very paradoxical and difficult statement to understand. It's almost like a primer to kind of get you into the state of mind of realizing that, okay, how can I even think about the reason of light? What would the reason of light be? And that's kind of what I was driving at. And that plays very well into what you guys are saying about, well, there's 3 cards here, but it might actually be a 4-fold structure. I'm kind of leaving that 4th slot to be a negative slot, to say that maybe we can't understand anything about that 4th slot, which would represent spirit. So I'm kind of leaving the negative area.
I think that's a great point, Nick. And I think I would go with, instead of the word God, Colleen Keybaird's suggestion was try the word it. And it starts to really unpackage more easily rather than playing the him, her, he, him, haw game. But I would then add to instead of a negative, the void of what we can't know, I would also put the comfortability with the not knowing. Basically, after someone's been through hell, they tend to have an anti-hysterical bias, and they're calmer in intensity. They're the eye of their own storm. They don't need to know. They have just a being. And instead of then just it's a negative, I think there's a non piece where a comfortability with a not knowing is a way to actionably integrate, enact, and engage all those functions when you have no clue. But something I guess I noticed this morning, I wrote in 2010, if you were in the wild, you would listen to your instincts. I suggest when you're in town, you might want to too. And so there's that not knowing that I think then can counterpoint to what you're saying with negatives and be inclusive of both of them.
Yeah, and I would also just add, before we kind of move away from this, because we're veering into very abstract territory here, that to even say God is an it, or and to sidestep the whole he, she, what have you, would even be to say too much. I think somebody who practices via negativa would just practice silence on this topic and would simply say nothing, because to say something is to overstep the boundary of what one can know.
Well, and that's fair, I think, to
Just an
keep in line
example-
with the tenor of your
example
direction.
of philosophy.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair to keep in line with the tenor of your direction.
But Raquel has her hand raised here, so let's hear what she has to say.
I just think that the Hermit card can be seen as the negative part because from this combination of 3 cards, I believe still that the Hermit has also an underlayer of defeat and sorrow and the withdrawn from society sometimes, because I think it's also a stage of life that shows us how to deal with our own mistakes somehow. So I think that about what you're saying, that I didn't quite understand that well, but I think that the negative part can be the Hermit card itself, because it has that negative tone, I think, because his knowledge is not an easy one, and it's not a completion in a good sense, you
Yeah.
know. It's kind of like,
Yeah,
it's more mature than, well, you guys get it.
well, I think you're making a salient point, but at the same time, I also think this is where language of what we're trying to describe
Exactly.
almost inevitably breaks down. What I mean by negative is more like non-existence, negative existence, no thing, rather than negative to mean something bad or any
Well,
in that vein.
That's a solid clarification, because then you can use the Hermit as the inner life as negative infinity and the outer life as positive infinity in the universe. So I appreciate that clarification, rather than being pejorative, kind of negative as in bad or mal or malaise. There is you're using an arithmetical and the numbers, 1, 0, -1, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2. That kind of negative, that's a solid clarification. That makes more sense to me now, because then it takes the Hermit to the inner light. And like Raquel said, it's not an easy place, but it is that dark thonic illumination within. But the negative with being like -1, negative integers as you're doing, that makes more sense than being negative like that's bad.
Yeah. And Raquel, your point is well taken. I mean, I think that the two things that we're each saying are both true, because there is, it brings up the larger question of, well, why does one seek out solitude and isolation from civilization? And it's, not all hunky-dory always. So that is definitely there as well. Gilda has her hand up, and then I'd like to march forth with the remaining slides that I have.
I will agree with the mention of language, because language is limited, and in studying philosophy, which is how to use language, nothing can ever be proven true. You can only prove that it is not true. So the truth doesn't really exist. You can only just disprove it. So with that understanding, then he's using reason, and reason is acquired using language. Language is a major player here. That's why I said it was related to Mercury, the sequence. And when it comes to language, can only be disproved, and therefore it is limited. And it, exactly like you said, at some point there's silence, and he knows that in order to receive that silence, he cannot be in the middle of a busy society place in order to receive that silence where something else can come in.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal point. And I I think I agree with everything, except I would take exception about the idea of philosophy as being something, a means of conveying through language, because what I'm trying to say with the idea of reason as it relates to the hermit and self-knowledge and the kind of overall net of associations that I laid out in his particular slide was that his knowledge is more of a deep and quiet knowing, what is truly meant by the word gnosis, something that's unspeakable, truly ineffable. And I think that everybody, to some extent or the other, has the experience of intuitively understanding something that we cannot explain. There are things that I would love to convey in some of these presentations or just in day-to-day life that I kind of intuitively understand, but that I don't have language for. And I'm not saying it's beyond the access of any other regular person. I'm just saying I think that there's a different kind of knowing, and that's what I was trying to point to. And it's the kind that bypasses the verbal aspects of the mind and the ability to convey that with rational and reasonable language.
We're wondering if the word hermit is related to Hermes.
It is. It
Yeah,
absolutely.
there we go. And who's Hermes Trismegistus? I mean, it's the three times great, the three times great
yeah.
one.
Thrice
And
great.
it's
Yes.
related to Mercury. So there we go.
Oh, and
Yes.
also the thrice born.
Yes. So there he's standing right in the, is waiting for the next cycle of the tarot. So even though we say these three as a relationship in reality, he very stated in what you share with Jodorowsky, right? They're all related.
Mhm.
The party is everyone is in reality an aspect of the totality of our experience. So
Yeah. Okay, so let me go on here and then just get through these final slides. Okay, and I didn't read that last one, so let me go back. Okay, so less discrete, more interpenetrating. The idea with combination is to present the three cards as stages in a metabolic process where the preceding one gives way to the card which follows, and in the final analysis expresses a totality. Various systems abound which posit that man is made up of 3 or 4 distinct levels. And the 3 or 4, I think, is a larger topic that probably is unwise to enter into here. All the same, this is especially true of the Kabbalah as well, which describes man as being comprised of body, emotion, psyche, and spirit, and can be studied in the Kabbalistic doctrine of the 4 worlds. What is also true of this area of Kabbalah is that each level interpenetrates and overlaps the one above and below, and yet still describes one process in total. For example, there is considerable overlap between the world of the body and the world of the emotion. While this is true in theory, it is also verifiable in the day-to-day. Think of a time that you've been provoked to extreme anger. Not only does the anger ping off of the emotional centers in the brain and generate chemicals such as adrenaline and noradrenaline, which excite the anger response, so too does the body's temperature increase, so much so that an MRI can pick up on the increased body temperature while engaged in an anger response. The redness associated with the anger response can be understood symbolically to be the lion in the strength card, which subjugates the cool, watery evaluation and judging process of the high priestess to raw, instinctive energy of the strength card. As such, this describes the interpenetration of the levels espoused via the cards in tonight's grouping. Other examples are to be made, but given the restrictions of format and time, I will omit further examples and leave you with the inference that this is true of the other levels as well. Okay, so now we are moving into the 4th card. So this is just kind of just an image of what I'm about to hopefully complete with. conclude with. Okay. Okay, so I titled this the meta theme. The overarching theme, and this is, I wanted to put parentheses, pun intended, and point towards the rainbow, but I decided to leave it out. But here we are. Okay, the overarching theme, which I have been driving at throughout this grouping, is that the Temperance card represents a threefold process. Remember the triangle from the earlier slide, previously represented individually as Strength, the High Priestess, and the Hermit, but now unified into a continual process of balancing under the banner of Temperance. The heavenly alchemist of Temperance pours the watery capacity for self-reflection onto the fiery lion of Leo, and simultaneously pours the fiery and instinctive energy of the lion onto the watery and self-reflective sign of Scorpio, the eagle. And the rays of the Hermit's lantern radiate from the holy mountain on which he stands in the background. After one toils upward to the Hermit, receives his teaching, and descends the back of the mountain, this is the situation that awaits the traveler. All previous stages of initiation are now unified and working in real time as an ever-tempered, ever-strengthened, ever-valuable, and ever-wise process. So I want to go backwards here and just show you. This structure here is essentially what I see in the Temperance card, how I understand the Temperance card, the triangle and the aspects inside the triangle as they relate to one another. So the Strength card associated with the lion, and Leo is represented in the Temperance card at the bottom left of the triangle here, with water being poured on the head. So tempering the fire with the water. And then at the right, the water sign of Scorpio, and more generally, the kind of watery realm, the capacity for self-reflection, is seen being, I guess, pouring fire or dropping little seeds of fire onto the watery sign. So tempering water with fire and tempering fire with water. And then in the back, we've got the mountains and the rays of the Hermit's lantern. And I was attempting to describe all of those as discrete steps in this process, which before this point in the series of the cards are represented individually, but after those different phases of initiation have been experienced, then are unified into one card, one continual process, and that is Temperance. So this was
Nick,
the theme above the theme.
Nick, that's a really good point for you to pick out with the Scorpionic or Scorpio self-reflection and the depth. Scorpio is very dark, and Temperance is not here in the card, but Temperance is ruled by Sagittarius, which is a sign right after Scorpio. And so that, like you said, let's back up to the Scorpio piece. There's the, okay, cascade back to the previous astrological sign, and there's the depth of self-reflection to then temper back in and make that fire tuned like a blowtorch rather than an open, just kind of amoebic loose flame that you couldn't cut a piece of steel with, kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you. I was really happy with this, and I thought that this would probably be meaningful for some other people. So
yeah, I think your Scorpio piece focuses the Sagittarius nucleus of the Temperance card so that it actually becomes actionable instead of this abstract tennis match back and forth between multiple players. And so I think when you really brought a good pairing together with Sagittarius in parentheses, you didn't mention that, but Temperance is ruled by it. When you drop back to Scorpio, you kind of threw a touchdown pass there.
Thank you.
I always thought that, so you represented five symbolic images, which, right, so you've got the lion, the eagle, the water, the fire, and the sun in the back from the Hermit's lantern. So that's
Well,
five.
I really see it as more like the triadic structure, the tripartite structure, which I was talking about at the beginning, where it's the lion being tempered by water, it's the eagle, the
Right.
warrior being tempered by the fire, and then in the
So
background is the mountain of the hermit.
right.
So
So
I'm
what
kind
I
of
was,
imagining that as this triangle.
right. What I was going to point out was that there's five, but then the angel itself is the sixth, is the combination of the three taken to a six.
Mhm.
In reality, it's on its way to the six. So even though it's a five, it's already showing signs of where the six is going, is what I was trying to say. So therefore, it's illuminated up here, and it's got the wings, and it's got the red right here at the forehead. So it's I sometimes see that each card is rather it comes from the one before, the one after, and the whole thing, but it's also on its way to the next thing.
Mhm.
And so the next thing, which is showing here, is the sixth possibility, which is, the radiance working in synergy and not beyond, because it already has tapered with fire, the water, with water, the fire, and there's a light in the background, that's five. And then, so the six is already in operation here. So that's what I was trying to say. And in your triangle, it would be like that center point. To get to the center point, you have three lines across and three going up to meet that center point. So that's a six. So that's reflected there. Even
Yeah,
though
no, I
it's
certainly
not
agree
obvious.
with you. I certainly agree with you that the Temperance card is not the end of the road, but rather just the beginning of a new stage. I mean, it completes if you break down the tarot into three lines with 7 cards apiece, the 14th card is the final card in the middle section. So after this, the traveler's got to go meet the devil.
Well, and Nick, you make with this quaternity now of cards that you have, bringing Temperance in, you kind of have made, I don't know, unconsciously, if it's intentional, the Hermit is then the inner world that's enacted. Temperance is in the outer world, the actionable that's engaged. And so the verb of Hermit is inner and the verb of Temperance would be outer. And so it's appropriate that then you're flanking them with strength, the power of inner animal voice. And High Priestess, which you aptly made a comment at the beginning, is pretty much everything. She is a grounded, out-of-body, visceral, conscious experience that is present, and also she's behind no veil. So I like the Hermit Temperance relationship as above, so below here. And it's interesting, you're putting the Hermit on the top and the above, so you have the dark with the light, and Temperance below, the light with the dark. So that's a really good double pairing, I think, from those in this series of 4.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to set up the idea that the Temperance contains all of these cards, and they're represented individually before you get to Temperance, but by the time you get to Temperance, they're all integrated within this circle. So that leads me to making these final points here. So,
well, and that's
here I've got the outer
just to quickly support you. Sagittarius is inclusive of all the other signs. It's not the last sign, because Aries is the first, but Sagittarius is the sign because it looks across to Gemini. Mercury communicates with everything so fast. Sagittarius then can relate to most every sign. So you make a good point there, even that's supported astrologically, I would say. Raquel may have more to add to that, but.
Cool. Okay. So the outer circle here, the black ring around the triangle, I assign Temperance card, the Temperance card. So this would be the kind of container in which all of the other cards fall or are contained in. And then A, again, is strength. B is the High Priestess. C is the Hermit, which then, by way of initiation, then has access to the previous stages and reasonably uses each of those previous stages of development. So moving from that, other sub and superordinations. So, as you can probably see by now, it would also be possible for anyone expressing their kind of inner dynamism to also be able to sub or superordinate any of the other things, the other lines that would go in opposite directions. So, as mentioned in the previous slide, sub and superordination of one element to the other is possible and even likely in the meta scheme presented in Temperance. Other possible outcomes of sub and superordination using the same scheme as in the previous slide are as follows. 1, B, the High Priestess subordinates the Hermit, C, giving you the High Priestess B in conjunction with the Hermit, C. The valuation and judging process of the High Priestess overrides the capacity for reason and logical knowledge, feeling, overthinking. 2, B, High Priestess superordinating strength, A, resulting in a conjunction of B with A. The instinctive is elevated to and tempered with the valuation and judging process by emotion and self-reflection. So it's the idea of the value creating capacity calling up the instinctive to work in conjunction with it, not in opposition. Okay, 3, A, strength subordinates the Hermit, C, A in conjunction with C. The overthinking and analysis paralysis of the Hermit is mitigated by sinking into the instinctive strength energy. So this is overthinking mitigated by just going into instinct, just kind of the ability to discontinue with overthinking and be carried along on the back of just instincts, just going through the motions. Okay, so 4, A, strength subordinates the High Priestess, B, resulting in A conjunction with B. The anxiety-laden state of constant self-evaluation is mitigated by dropping down into one's instinctive aspect. Okay, so I just included these because, as you can see in this triangular structure, I've only got C then accessing A or accessing B, but A could also access C, B could also access A, and so on. So those are the additional.
Yes, that's what I was seeing without really knowing what you had done. That was what I was getting, that you could, they all access each other. It depends on where your epicenter is seated.
Right. I mean, that to me seems like reason or wisdom in its true form, is really accessing all of those in a dynamic form, and, the ability to move between rather than to simply be, to use reason above all other capacities at all times.
I sometimes feel uncomfortable with too much reason, but wisdom sounds really good to me.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth mentioning that, some of the words like psyche and anima are where we get words like animate, the ability to move between. So that's all I've got. Thank you all for watching. So,
well, Nick, can you go back to your last slide?
Yeah.
I'll unraise my hand. Yeah. I'll unraise my hand here. It's interesting to me too, because if I drop into number 3, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of logos for an Eros card. But then I look at this with the 4 psychological functions, or in the context of the 4 psychological you're kind of toggling between logos.
Hey, you're breaking
as
up
they
pretty
apply
badly.
to.
Can you double back?
How about this? Is this better? Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't know if anybody heard your previous comments.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah. Can everybody else? Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk slower. There's a storm here too. The lightning may be doing some of that. It seems too, you have a nice allusion here to the 4 psychological functions, and that you're kind of toggling between logos and eros as to how they can dance with each other to resolve out with these 4 qualities, from your High Priestess strength, your subordinating aspects. And I think I really appreciate that, because, for example, the overthinking and analysis paralysis of a hermit, if I stop there, a big what question mark, but is mitigated by sinking into the instinctive strength energy. And that sinking into the instinctive strength energy to me is the eros portion of the hermit.
Yeah, you could easily say I'm getting out of the mind and into the body.
Yes. And use heart. I mean, it's all in one, then head or heart. You're actually utilizing one integrated mode of being. So it doesn't actually function as logic as say the way you're.
Jordan, I'm sorry, man, but you're not coming through clearly at all. It seems like maybe your internet connection is unstable or something, but I think we're all.
You're breaking up too now.
Shit. Well, I do not know what to do about that, but
well, it's okay. I think we got there with your dance as the body. I think that's a great. We can stop. I think that puts the umbrella over it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm going to just go back to just here, and I'll just leave this up, and we can just have some general discussion. Or I can stop my share. What would you guys prefer?
I'll say that something that we haven't quite talked too much about is the colors, the way that which deck is this?
It's the Boto deck.
But colored by whom?
I don't know. I mean, these are the assigned colors that they instruct you to use, but these are just sourced from online. I mean,
Okay.
I've colored these myself.
You did.
They're not quite this good and uniform, but
okay. Because the colors, mine is not colored, and I've never colored it. So, but it is completely. It's like a line of dynamics in and out of itself that without specific definitions will lead you to the comprehension of what you have discussed. There's green, and then the Temperance has the green near the feet where the two animals are seated. So it's a base, and the yellow that is available in strength and is hidden in the lamp only in the Hermit is brought in the background in the Temperance. Now he's out of the cave, out into where it can be seen and integrated. It's kind of like now it's integrated, whereas in the Hermit, he's holding it inside a container. He's in a container, and then it splashes out by the time it gets to Temperance.
I'm so glad that you bring up the cave thing, and I didn't include that, but that's more of the allegory of the cave is more or less what I was basing all of this on, Plato's scheme of
as in Plato, yeah,
man as a lion and as a social animal, and also an animal with the capacity for intellect and reason, the tripartite soul.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even
the yellow in the High Priestess is almost not there because to reflect, if you have too much light, you cannot see it. It's overexposed. So you see that little yellow down there next to the water in the High Priestess?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's barely there.
Yeah.
And that is because you can't, when there's too much sun, if it hits you can't see. So she's busy reflecting. So that might be. So yeah.
Well, that's a great point with the gold, and I would actually double back on the little there being actually the biggest part of the card, because her foundation is that light, but that what gives her the reflection. So it's least seen, but there's an intensity in that subtle piece. And even the cave, going to the cave, like an egg, if an egg is cracked from outside, life ends. And if an egg is cracked from within the beak of the bird or the snake or what have you, alligator, turtle, life begins. And so if someone enters that cave, the interference patterns stop the cave meditation, and the the enlightenment is almost over. Whereas then the hermit comes out of his or her own accord, and the new phase begins.
That's a beautiful allegory of the egg when cracked from outside gives life, and then from inside out, it's life giving. And when it's cracked from the outside in, it's not. That's beautiful, Jordan. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that.
Yeah, because I when it's
That
cracked
is
from
there,
outside,
yeah.
life ends. I'm like, wow, that's a really powerful. I read that a couple of weeks ago, and it was
Yeah.
just, well, that says a lot in several words.
Oh yes, it's beautiful. And here you see the strength part of the all this light is available, but it can be overwhelming when to further the path. It has to, so it goes through the trajectory there, which I imagine that the light here is symbolic of logos and Mercury. That's the sense I get. So
That's a great point. And also that puts the high priestess, the intensity of the subtlety of the light at the bottom, and then the dominance and the presence of the primary depth or darkness of her, counterpointed or in opposition astrologically to strength, where then the dark is the lion, and actually the dark is the mouth. The black is the mouth going inside the unconscious. That's the subtle black, where then you have the reversal of all the gold being so ever present through the background of the rest, and even the border of the rest of the card.
Yeah, and then you pop the black in the hermit, then the black becomes important, the whole background.
And he's focused on the light. And then
Right.
both, and you get dark and light together, pretty integrated in thirds and actually in quarters. You get the two browns at the bottom, then the golds, then the sanguine reds, and then the golds and the blue at the top, then all united on the pillar of this one two-handed masculine feminine thing. Person.
Notice the hermit's blue hat. I mean, what's that blue hat about? I'm going, okay, it's tying up the water. Now the reflection that the high priestess can see is now up in his head. He's brought it up to closer to the crown, where his intellect can work.
Well, and that's a good point with the blue, because then the darkness is now watering his head. The darkness is watering thought. So there's a nourishing Plato's cave analogy you make there with the blue water on the head and the intellect, where that's really the cave. That darkness is good for thought. It pushes thought. It stresses thought. It basically, like a gardener, it amends the soil as of the thought.
Well, you're able to see because the light is contained, just like in the strength card. She needs to contain the instinct. You also need to contain the light in order to have it function and evolve into the next step. Otherwise, it's overexposed and you can't see anything, or you don't have
good
anything
point.
you can't see.
Yeah, the vessel of the ego, even then being the logos that contains the psyche.
Yeah. And the wings of Temperance is red and blue. So it's got the blue of the reflection and the red of instinct and activity, working as the vehicle of transcendence. Because wings, take you somewhere. So, yeah.
Well, and then your gold, the lion has the gold eyes. So the vision is the power of the lion. And then the beak and the claws, the connection of the eagle is its power down in Temperance.
It's interesting that it's around his head. The garland of the green is around his head, and then on her is on top of her head. So it emphasizes the head again. I've read a lot of these things, and in the Kabbalah especially, a lot it's basically Mercury and Hermes. This is the intelligence that is brought forward, as the most prominent feature.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm a little bit surprised to not hear you make any comment on the idea of the chakras, and I wonder if you can, because correct me if I'm wrong here. I know virtually nothing about uh, chakra stuff, uh, but you did you say that the lowest chakra is red?
That's the first one, of course. That's the origin, the Muladhara. The first one is red.
So you don't think there's anything there about it going from the lowest red to her crown?
No, what it is that green is the heart. So when you match the Shakti that gets out of the red and rises to the heart, that's where there's a meeting at the heart center. So the lion, remember, also rules the heart. So without the heart, you can't get to up there to the logos. Without a heart, logos without a heart, that's trouble.
You guys are gonna have to chill out with this logos and arrows talk. You're gonna summon Skip back into the conversation.
Well,
Well, I did it on purpose because I haven't been here so long, so
The-
I had to play some fun in there.
yeah, the green is the opposite of red also. And in order to see green, red must be present in the background. And in order to see red, green is present in the background. So since you mentioned, and she, like the high priestess has the green and the red, that's the heart and the raw energy. Raw energy is red. That's the first chakra is red. So without red, nothing is born. Red is
Mhm.
the force of creation. It is the movement that allows creation to come forth. And green,
Yes, and
yeah.
as Colleen says, Colleen Kiebert, follow the red because it's coming from the creative wellspring in the bottom of that, bottom left quadrant, and follow the red because there's the life. Follow the red because that's the heart of the matter of how the life is being transformed through, say, a doodle or a collage or
Right,
through your life.
And in Temperance's Bindu here is red. I don't know, looks a little orange. I don't know if it's orange or red or what, but he's got the red now sitting in the third eye. When it's Temperance, he's using the higher function of the sixth sense to create. But the background, the rainbow is still not complete because it's not a full circle. It's only half a circle. So even though his whole head and the bindu is sitting inside, the background is still not fully completed. Like when we go to the sun sign, number 19, it is fully completed. It's a one full round. So.
Well, and with your chakras too, that crown chakra, the aura boundary or powerful limit is the rainbow. So after it gets past the crown chakra, then it's out into the world and all the other pretty colors, so to speak. Not all of them, because the whole rainbow is not there. But it's interesting that it's almost like an echo or waters or spiritual ripples moving up and outward, emanating from the head in the form of that rainbow. As if the head from the heart is making the impression to ripple outward concentrically on a pond, so to speak.
It noticed that the Temperance has a star in the heart center and it's gold. So it moved from the strength of the lion being red, which is the root chakra is red, is the first one, right? At the very entrance of our genitals, right?
Yes.
There. And so it moved to create the yellow. Now is in his heart center, and the red is in the sixth, in the forehead. So there is a certain unity of heart and mind that is starting to occur here. And that is also shows in the wings, that has got the blue of reflection coupled with the action of red. So when those two are coupled, then something else happens. Wisdom occurs.
There was a larger point about that, and I'm glad you picked up on it, that I didn't think I would be able to make in my presentation, because it would require probably more commentary on slides and just information to hit people with in a presentation. But now I wonder if I can make it, and it relates to what you all are saying right now. So allow me to attempt this. So with all the talk of six and the sun and insight and reason, you notice the temperance, the angel in the temperance card not only has, several elements of solar symbolism, but also a sun symbol on the forehead. And it's really interesting that you guys are talking about that as kind of a focal point, a center around which everything moves, a heliocentric kind of thing. And I was describing 3 different phases, successive phases of evolution or psychological development, what have you. So if one wants to properly draw the tree of life, you draw 3 circles, okay? So you draw 1 circle, and then you divide it by 6 and make your marks around there, 60 degrees apiece. So that gives you a 6-pointed star, right? Star of
Nick?
David, the Sill of Solomon. Yeah.
I think that it's better for you to close the presentation, because then in the YouTube channel, people can see your tree of life.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so let me just draw out what I'm saying here. So if you want to make a proper tree of life, you draw 3 overlapping circles, and then you divide that 360-degree circles into 6 sectors. So you end up with this here, which then also gives you the Star of David, or the Sill of Solomon, here, when you make a star inside of it. But in order to properly draw the tree of life, you make that pattern 3 times. So you draw 1 circle. Yeah, I'm using 4 circles, but loosely a circle. And then at the point of the bottom 3 points, where the top of the second 6-pointed star would start, you draw another circle, like so. And then where those 2 circles intersect and overlap right there, you draw your 3rd circle, like so. And then that gives you the center of the tree. Make sense so far? So from there, at all of those different angles, which you will inevitably have marked out, you're then able to construct a precise tree of life. And so, I mean, this is a poorly constructed one because I'm not using any tools, but then that gives you the 10 spheres on the tree of life. And the center, the point at which these 3 circles meet and overlap, is the center of the sun, the 6th sphere, the sphere of Tiferet. And, it kind of just reifies this idea that everything is moving around the sun. The solar symbol in the temperance card is the center of everything. And the solar symbolism also connotes this larger idea of Tiferet as the center of the tree. So I thought it really interesting that you could also think of this as like the realm of instinct in the bottom. You could think of this as the realm of the emotion and the mind. You could also think of this as the realm of spirit. And that's very often how people break up the Kabbalistic worlds. There's also a lower world, a 4th circle, which would be the realm of matter. But that's kind of all behind what I was attempting to convey with this presentation, these 3 successive stages, leaving the 4th one off intentionally. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it sounded to me like you guys were beginning to kind of circle around this idea of the sun the solar symbolism in the card. And I wanted to include that in my presentation and give a more thorough explication, but I didn't think it would fit within the amount of time.
So you left the fourth one out, which is in your scheme is matter. That's the one you left out.
Well, look, if you're looking at the tree of life here, you see you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a circle around there. And then there's always a sphere here, which is called dot, and it's actually a non-sphere. It's very much like the idea I was talking about of non-existence.
Okay.
So you would take that to be the start of the second 6-pointed circle. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That creates your second circle. So then you've got a circle here, a circle here, and this is the point, the center, at which the third circle is then created. So you would imagine that this continues down. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a circle here. That would be the third world. And then you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, on down. And that would be the realm of matter. So it's not even a full circle. It's only 2 spheres that correlate to that bottom world. Or you can think about it in terms of triads. So this would be the upper world, the realm of spirit. This would be the realm of psyche. This would be the realm of emotion. And this would correlate to the realm of matter. Malkuth.
Okay. Now I understand
know
that. I never quite understood it, but that was easy. Thank you for explaining that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to do so. I fear that if I go any further into it, I will probably leave some people behind. So let's move on from this. But I did want to just at least mention that and hopefully bait some people's interests.
Yes, it was.
I'd like us to come back in a second. There's too many million images. I'm going to find it, but something I discovered about 10 years ago with the tree. We can come back to it. It's just this image. It's something seen and the discovered geometrically years ago. I'll come back to once I find it.
Cool.
So keep going. I mean,
that's all I had on that particular topic. We can totally go into some other stuff, but I just kind of wanted to point in that direction.
Well, perhaps if I can share this that I discovered the other day. Hopefully, it won't complicate matters. And that's what made me realize that the tree of life goes from the top down, or does it go from actually you evolve to Kether, right? The top to the top. But in Robert Place, I think is his name. He's Robert M. Place. He has all these tarot cards and books and a fabulous website. And he says that, and he's researched and he's opened little museums and such. And he said that he finally discovered that there in the Trump, all the 22, in reality, they begin with the world. They begin and then they come down. So in reality, that's thinking that we are already carrying this, let's say, enlightened function, and that we come into a body in order to manifest it. So it actually goes from there to the sun, to the moon reflection. And if you look at it, the magician, and then card number 2, you can reverse it, and the world being the full.
Well, and that's what Bob's new deck is about.
Yeah, and then the second would be the magician, would be the sun, and then the third.
Gilda, it's great.
Then it comes the high priestess, which is reflection. So you actually move from the top down, exactly as you move from the bottom up. So this to me was like a wow. To me, it's the feminine way, or one is the logo's way, the other one is the arrow's way, and in reality, they both accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, the top down and bottom up is an important distinction to make too. I mean, I think
Yes.
virtually in all matters, but specifically in what I was talking about tonight,
Mhm.
would be initially a bottom up kind of
Yes.
theory of development.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, there's both the up and down
Yes.
of understanding the tree of life.
So the
And that's
trumps can
how-
also be read from that, but it might be something a little more advanced. So a person can relate to that as the work they've done within their inner life in order to be able to follow that trajectory. Where the other
And
one
that's-
it's more daylight. Okay, you're moving in this direction in order to reach enlightenment, versus you're already enlightened and you're moving in this direction to realize it.
And there's a really subtle and yet profound point in there that at least I pick up on. I mean, I don't know if this is true all across the board, but it's kind of what I take to be the meaning of the movie Holy Mountain. And I guess I'll say this may be a spoiler alert, but I'm just going to say it because it's relevant to what we're talking about. But the whole idea, or at least the main idea I take away from the Holy Mountain, is that there's all of these people that are striving to go atop the Holy Mountain, and they're seeking enlightenment, and they're seeking retreat from the world. And they get up there and they meet the spiritual master, and he says, none of this is real. Go live your life. Go back down into the world. And I think
that's the third function.
Yeah, well, I think that's true also of the Hermit, and I think it kind of gets to the point that Raquel was making about the negative aspects of the Hermit card, because it's like, you don't go up there just to stay up there. I mean, it's like snowy and there's nobody up there. There's no food. There may be a little bit of water in the form of melted snow and ice, but it's like, you got to go back to your life. You got to go back to the world at some point. It seems like the retreat is a necessary prelude to rejoining the world.
That's a tipping point of a dimensional tipping point. Once you get there, if the being wants to further, they are again two paths. You either die and move on, or you have to come back down and bring forth just to share with others how to get there. So, I finally had that realization. That's it. There's nothing else to do. That person that has reached there has done it all. So what's next? What can you do next? It's not just live your life. You've already lived your life in every cycle. So now you become a teacher. You come back to help others fulfill their lives, or you leave. Those are the two choices.
And I think I was attenuating earlier. The storm here is really kicking my connection. You mentioned Robert Place, and Bob Place, his new deck is just about that. He's going through, he's presenting it card by card on Facebook, starting with the world and moving down. And actually, we should try to get Bob on the show. I mean, I know him personally, and he's a great guy. He's funny, and the depth of his alchemy knowledge and such is great. But here's the picture I wanted to show you, Nick, and show everyone that let's see if it'll show up. If you draw the tree of life with 3 lines rather than 1, hidden underneath the Sephiroth at the intersections of, let's see if you see what happens when you draw the 3 lines vertically over on, the Star of David is formed hidden under at the heart of each Sephiroth. So if you draw 3 lines to compose the tree of life, the Star of David exists geometrically hidden under each of the spheres.
Right.
It's not only under each of the spheres. It's like the
it was always there.
It's the form of the entire thing at every level. I mean, you're
at every level. Yeah. So you shift focus and redirect scale, and you have the same shape.
Yeah. So we should get Skip around here. He wanted to know that fifth, add the 5th suit. That is the 5th suit. But
Mm,
it's not the fifth, it's the sixth, because the trumps are one suit plus the other four, that's five. So the sixth suit is actually what's being manifested. And that is that underlying scheme that has all of them in
could
it.
you speak to that more? I don't see, I see the number 6, but I don't see a sixth suit attribution supported by that. Could you expand on that a little bit,
Because
Gilda?
there's four suits, and actually, and I researched, and the trump is the fifth. The trump is actually a suit. The trumps 1 through 22,
Mhm.
that's a suit, plus 4, that's 5. But in reality, so 5 is already there. Okay, so you're looking for a fifth suit, but it's already there, right? The trumps
Well,
creates it.
the
So if you
majors aren't
do,
a suit. The majors
but
aren't
they,
a suit. The suits are composed of elemental cards.
well,
The trumps
trump,
each have all elements in them. I mean,
the
Raquel,
trumps,
could you speak to?
well, the trumps, in my estimation, acts as a suit. And so what's really being looked for is a sixth suit, and that is the third. The sixth, we've done the fifth, we've lived, the fifth is the throat, the speech, language, we've mastered that. Now comes the next evolution, is to master the third, the right here, and that is the sixth. So that is just my realization. Maybe other people have other realizations, but that one is the one that was given to me by my guides.
Raquel, could you speak to that from your perspective?
Actually, I agree more with Jordan because I've always seen the 22 trumps as something else and bigger than the suits, something more complex than the suits. But what actually I would like to say about everything that you guys been discussing is that I remembered about the beginning of the book Zarathustra from Nietzsche. I don't know how to pronounce that in English, but in that book, he begins at the top of the mountain, and he begins his journey at the end. You know, the descending of the mountain. So I believe that what Gilda was saying or was talking about being born enlightened, you know, with everything that you can possibly have, and then you realize as long as when you start to grow, they kind of lose that enlightenment, but it always there inside of you. To me, it also correlates to the idea of thinking about the cave myth of Plato. When he comes out of the cave, he becomes blind by the light because he was not used to that. So I think in one way of the or the other, you come off one prison to get in another one. Because even though you get enlightened, it's too much almost. Because at the end of that story, he ends up being killed by everyone that is inside of that cave still. So I'm just trying to bring back a more human perspective of everything that's being said today with Nick's presentation, because although I think it's so powerful, so much powerful to talk about all those things, I think it's also kind of too much. I mean, what we can actually achieve inside one human life, you know, and how can we know that we are enlightened enough or not? And I think that Nietzsche in Zarathustra had a very good perspective of that, because with the idea of the eternal comeback. I don't know how is it said in English, that concept.
Return.
Yeah.
Which is the phoenix, basically.
Yeah, but you have to always affirm your way of life. I mean, if you had to come back and live the exact same life, you have to do it all over again at the same in the same way, doing the same stuff, making the same choices. That is the affirmative of life, you know, and that is like the idea of Nietzsche's perspective. I think that I don't know, that's just something that came across my mind whenever
Yeah, I really want to
Well,
pick up on that, because that's exactly what I take from the point in the Holy Mountain. I mean, it's like these people retreat from life entirely, and it's like the spiritual master that they think is going to be like, and now I'll just take you off into heaven and we'll just live as pure spirits, is like, no, go back down.
Yeah.
Just be a human being. You've got to live.
Right.
Yeah.
And also,
Well, and
I
go
also
ahead.
just want to say it's really interesting to me that one of the first chapters in Zarathustra is called On the Three Metamorphoses, and he presents the change from the camel to the lion to the child. Gemel, the Hebrew letter associated with the high priestess, is the camel, and obviously the lion of Leo, and then the child which comes from that. I mean, I don't know if the hermit's a child under all of that, but I think it's interesting that there seems to be kind of a somewhat similar scheme. I mean, all of these themes that we're talking about seem to be related in some meaningful way.
Well, I agree, and I think, Raquel, that you humanized it and brought it into let's spread it out at a different scale and a different strength, voice, because thus spake Zarathustra. One of the primary pieces is the capital D, down going. I mean, that's the whole going inside. But what's something that you just sparked that I'd never thought before is that when the hermit comes out of Plato's cave, he goes blind. Well, instead of being blind as a limitation, he's transformed to a new iteration and a new mode of being, because he's learned to see in the dark. So when he comes out, his eyes go away so he can continue to live in the dark out here. So in a sense, he brought the cave outside the cave by going blind. I hadn't thought about that before, but then carries forth. But it's interesting that then those who are still in the cave end up killing him. So it's interesting that then, almost like if you live in the psychic contents only, you will dissolve. And then there goes back to, you know, Nick and the alchemy with dissolution and in the process of alchemy. But it was interesting that he went blind. I always thought about that. Oh, poor hermit. Now he's blind. But just now I went, no, he learned to see in the dark. And so he brought that with him and he stayed in the unconscious, but then was dissolved because he stayed in the unconscious, potentially, as a thought.
Yeah, because I think that's not really about climbing the mountain or getting at the top, but it's how can you communicate that to others, you know, without
Right.
making them go through the same experiences as you, and at the same time creating a level of correlation with other people, you know?
When I think you can't, because you have to experientially, viscerally experience. You have to walk the fire. If you just talk about it a lot, again, Jung, you know, if you are not what you say you're going to do, you are what you do. And if you don't go through that, I don't think you get that anti-hysterical bias where you can be the eye in your own storm. And every once in a while, reach into the chaos for the, you know, the fortune treasures that are always stirred up, you know, the gold in the river that comes up when the storm goes through and hides behind the rock afterwards. It's a good point. How can you express that to someone? You can't head teach them. You have to, that's where shamanic guidance, where you have to actually live through the experience.
Look, this is exactly what I was talking about with the hermit. I mean, I don't want to reduce it down to saying this is what I've been saying all along, but at the same time, like, I pretty much imagine the hermit as being Socrates, and Plato just giving his account of Socrates being killed. Like he has that deep intuitive, or as you say, perhaps shamanic participative knowing that is difficult to communicate. I mean, it's like beyond what words can express almost. And he doesn't know himself autobiographically, but he existentially deeply knows himself. Just like, you're not what you say you believe, you are what you do. You are as you exist.
Well, and even in, I think, the comments, it was either Justin Case or Patrick Hollywood said, if you box God in, and had a really interesting comment in there in the chat I noticed earlier. I've had a hard time toggling between. My video keeps popping out when I do, but can you hop in the chat and see Patrick's comment, or it may have been Justin Case, I can't remember which one, but about boxing God in, which you were just kind of doing, but in a different way.
I'm sorry, I fell out of attention there. Were you saying that the comment was lodged against me, or that was just kind of
no, it wasn't lodged against anyone. It was just a comment of, when you box God in, reductionist this and that it made a good point where you kind of just came back to the same point they made. So it felt like a correlation of in the chat room. Tonight I've tried to use 2 devices, but it won't let me sign in. So when I go over there, I disappear here. And so plus this storm, I can't get in. But let
me see if I can find that comment.
Yeah, just to respect their comment. And it seemed to be applicable as if they were here on the panel with us from previous, that they made a comment that might step in and kind of dance or hold hands with what you just said.
One says, put God in a deductive corner and wait for more deduction. Peel back the opinion until you are left with just a smell, and then they correct.
That was Nicole then, and it was onion. Peel back the onion.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Until you're left with just the smell, and then there you go with the so big and so there, I can't see it, but I smell it. So there's a deep knowing, though I can't touch, feel, or see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to like not immediately branch out into really abstruse material, but to go back to mentioning the guy Marsilio Ficino that I was kind of talking about earlier, the way that he describes spirit is actually as smell. I don't know if that's something that N1 knows, or just it's a very happy coincidence, but he describes the way that spirit communicates as like the smell of wine, or the smell of sweet perfume, or something like that.
Well, and Salvador Dali said you don't drink wine, you mine its secrets through your nose. And so there's the smell, fragrance, aroma, putridity, then is a visceral ether. So there is that spirit, or spiritus, as it were. So, I mean, that I hadn't thought about this, but yeah, smell is kind of that elemental minor arcana God, or divine, I'll say, capital D, divine, because even actually, if you walked into old houses and they have some heebie-jeebies, there's some, I won't call it fragrance, there's a get out, and kind of thing. And it's interesting to me that it's not because someone didn't clean the bathroom. It's something completely else.
I practice aromatherapy, and I learned it from someone from India. And this smell is associated with memory.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't know if anyone here, if you've remembered something and actually re-smelled it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the most beautifully strange, wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
So Raquel, you were going.
That smell is actually the biggest trigger that you can have after you lose someone that you loved, because it's pretty weird and wonderful and sad experience, because it comes out of nowhere, and sometimes you don't even come near anything that is related to the person that you lost, but the smell is there. So It's pretty powerful, and it actually kind of like it is a small divine experience, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's very real world examples of that. I mean, I think that's exactly what you're saying too. I can't remember exactly what part of the brain that it's related to, but yeah, the sense of smell is the one sense that bypasses all of the other parts of the, I don't know, I can't remember the parts of the brain right now, but it goes directly to the memory center and evokes this extreme nostalgic response. And I'm sure we've all had the experience of smelling something and being transported instantly back to that memory in that place and time. I mean, it's a really, really, really powerful experience.
It really is. And I won't say this is off color, I mean halfway, but I saw a cartoon last week and had, one dog sniffing another's rump, and on the caption was, in one sniff, a dog gets more information than a human does in a year. So but the ability, that's being fluent in that they got everything they needed to know. I mean, hey Bob, I thought it was you, sniff,
That's
sniff.
very
Oh, yep,
funny.
it is you.
It's probably true.
Well, people, and there's the old phrase, the smell as strong as a pregnant woman. And what that is that a woman's sense of smell heightens during pregnancy because she needs to know where all predators are. And though there's help around, she needs to be aware without any, so that she's the center of the universe protected. I mean, so people with a sense of smell have almost a pregnancy piece, because it's there to protect you. So you can see it coming from a mile away and not be there when it gets there. Time to climb the tree.
That's the way I tell whether the food has gone bad in the refrigerator or not. I smell it.
So you're really a guy. Because people are like, why are you smelling your milk?
How do you know when your blue cheese is turned?
And also
because you throw up afterwards.
It's very interesting that you made the dog analogy. In mating, it's if the person cannot, it does not resonate with the other's smell.
Mhm.
There's always a distance that takes place. But when they like it, they come into the space.
Well, what's interesting about that, Gilda, is that medically, when someone's smell is attractive to you, this isn't the only thing, but one of the things is that your antibodies are almost polar to theirs. And so what happens if you have a baby, the baby brings two different antibody sets together to make a stronger, more healthy person when they're born. But if someone walks by with the same antibodies, you might even be totally blind to them and not even see them, because your sense of smell will just ignore it. So when they say chemistry, it's often literally the antibodies and the aroma, fragrance, or other words, that.
It's very ancient.
Like turn somebody down on the grounds of like not digging their smell would be the ultimate way to turn somebody down. Well,
no, actually, no, I have to say it's, I've said no because they wore too much perfume. I'm like, what are you hiding from? I don't know. This is a lie. I can't tell who you are. And so, I mean, wear perfume later, but I need to know you smell like, or I might be in danger. Why are you dating a cobra? Oh, it looked like a woman. It's like, so
you smelled like a woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you simply didn't resonate there with, period.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't like the perfume. It's it was my excuse. So this has been great, Nick. I love the way it's kind of gone around in a big circle, and then we kind of dropped in, and then Raquel brought it into the last, come across the finish line with it. Let's humanize it a bit, because I think we've kind of hit so many scales today with your presentation. I appreciate starting so methodically, and then after we get the compulsories down, just kind of let the horses run.
Yeah, I think this works really well too. I know that I personally, and I'm sure you all could probably say more than we are able to within an hour, but I think given the format and the variety of people and their experience with tarot, probably watching at home, I think we can say everything that's necessary to say within an hour. And then beyond that, yeah, just kick it around and have some fun with it. So
Yeah, I think any of us here could talk till the whole world was blue in the face about any one of the topics that, or any one of the words in the whole presentation. So I think it's good to, let's just have a 2 or 4 course meal. Let's not like, read the whole encyclopedia and then any questions, kind of thing.
yeah, well, it's 9:57, so I am hoping to conclude by 10 or 10:05. So if anybody has any concluding thoughts, questions, remarks, please go ahead and throw those out.
Well, we appreciate your elucidating the connectivity of the tree of life, because we haven't really explored it in depth, and but we understand all the parts. So
I wonder, I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, and I realize now that it may be before you joined us, but I gave a presentation a little under a year ago on this page just about the tree of life. So if you want to learn kind of basics, that is available to you. It was last
October, right?
I think, yeah.
October, November 11th ish, somewhere around there.
So that would be where in the Facebook.
No,
it's
YouTube. It's YouTube. You just have to scroll back.
Skip's archives.
So what do I Google?
Type in Tree of Life. Once you get into Skip's, type in Advanced Reading Group, Depth Psychology, Skip Conover, and then type in Tree of Life. It should kind of dial you right to it. Because there's so many videos.
That won't do it. I'm sorry.
No?
It may, but it wasn't an advanced reading group thing. So it was just on the channel. It was a session much like this. Skip had already started his tarot series, and I had joined and was incessantly mentioning the Tree of Life. So he said I should probably do something about it. So I gave a presentation. If you go back,
you're right. So
if you just get on YouTube and go to Skip's videos on his channel and thumb back to, they say, or it seems that Raquel
found it. Raquel found it. She put it in the chat.
She's so good with that.
The archivist with the tarot research. Bam.
Those young millennials. What would we do without them?
Well, I wouldn't call her a millennialist. I'd call her an archivist with a capital A. She's like, no, it's right here. Boom.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, it worked right there because that was like 3.6 seconds.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's very basic, Gilda, but it's I think it's more than enough to kind of,
since I do have some I probably will get a lot out of it.
I hope so. All right, well, thank you all very much. This has been a treat, and I hope it's been meaningful to some people out there, and hopefully pissed off a few of the right
I want to
people.
thank all of you guys. Yeah, piss off a few of the right people. Otherwise, sometimes nothing great begins without a little controversy. And so that's important. But I want to thank all you guys. It's so great to be back, and everyone in the YouTube chat. I mean, Nicole was there, Patrick Hollywood, Justin Case. I appreciate the welcome too. When I came back in the chat and see people like, yay. So I really thank you for that. But it's so great to see your guys' faces again. And honestly, it's so great just to have one more piece of the move. But I'm home. So I'll be here now next week, obviously, because I'm presenting now. So hop in and you threw me right in the frying pan. So
yeah, well, the feeling is mutual.
Actually, I jumped in. So
settled in. And yeah, for everybody who's watching, thank you for watching. And please check back next week. Jordan Hoggard is going to give a presentation on a combination of his own. So please stay tuned and we will see you then. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.